Chapter 14, Mineral and Bone Metabolism. This will help you review bone structure, physiology, and metabolism. Two keywords, modeling and remodeling, about the formation, initial and continuous or previous surfaces. We're looking for biochemical markers for bone formation, either modeling or remodeling. And here are some listed. However, basically most of them are not specific for bone, so they're not necessarily helpful for us. An ideal marker would be released at a rate proportional to the bone production, and it should be released unchanged if you have disease. Three minerals involved in bone production are calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. These again exist in a free and a bound form. We're more concerned with free in some areas. However, we're not able to measure all of these in the free format. Calcium is 98% involved in skeletal and teeth, so it is significant. There is a small percent, 2%, in our extracellular fluid. In our blood, 50% of it is in the free or ionized form. 40% is bound to proteins, and there's 10% that is complexed. So we are concerned mostly with the free, but we do measure total. This diagram shows you the organs involved in calcium and some of the interaction they have. The parathyroid glands up by the thyroids are involved in calcium absorption and use in bone. Notice in the renal system, calcium is increased and phosphorus is decreased. So they work directly opposite of each other. There again with feedback mechanism with our renal reabsorption. Calcium functions to transmit nerve impulses. It's also a cofactor with certain enzymes. You learned how it was involved in the coagulation cascade. We do need it with our skeletal system, and it's used in cell membrane integrity. Free or ionized calcium is a best indicator of the calcium status because it is the biologically active form. It is regulated by the parathyroid hormone and vitamin D. We measure it in blood using ISEs. It is temperature and pH dependent in and outside of the body, so we perform these on a stat basis. Total calcium can be measured with a photometric colorimetric method using orthocresophthalene complexone, most common method. The atomic absorption is our reference method, however it's a little too expensive for major laboratories. Phosphorus is in the form of phosphate, and it is intracellular and extracellular. It's absorbed in the intestines. Vitamin D increases your intestinal and renal absorption. Parathyroid hormone will act upon the absorption of these areas. There again, it's opposite of calcium. So when we have an elevated calcium, phosphorus is not going to be absorbed as much. Its methodology most commonly used is an ammonium molybdate. We can make a color complex by adding certain substances to read at higher wavelengths. Magnesium is half involved in skeletal and half in intracellular, 55 and 45% respectively. It serves as a cofactor for enzymes and cell energy metabolism along with membrane stability. It also works with potassium movement through your membranes. It is regulated by the parathyroid hormone. Magnesium measurement methods use a colorimetric using metallochromic dyes. Here are your reference intervals. Note your ionized calcium portion is performed on whole blood, whereas the others are performed on serum or plasma. Remember, calcium is used in several anticoagulants, so you would not want to use those for calcium measurement. We usually use our heparin if we need the whole blood or a plasma specimen for our mineral testing. Parathyroid hormone is a peptide from the parathyroid gland, and its secretion is dependent on our ionized calcium amount. Inversely proportional. It decreases when this ionized calcium is increased because we don't need it. We have enough of the active free ionized form. The actions of parathyroid hormone, as we said, are to regulate ionized calcium along with phosphorus for our bone reabsorption, and it is involved in our production of vitamin D, which will cause an increase in intestinal reabsorption of calcium. Sometimes we need to do procedure on the parathyroid hormone. There may be a tumor or partial growth. It is parts, and so we surgically remove just that portion, and we will have an order for an intraoperative parathyroid hormone. We are actually to perform the hormone assay while the patient is in surgery. The physician will move a portion of the tissue. He doesn't want to get any more than he has to, so he may leave the patient actually open while you're doing the measurement. So it's a super stat procedure because they're waiting to decide if they need to remove more of the organ. Vitamin D is a steroid, and it's either ingested, or the biggest way that we can easily absorb it is through the skin from sunlight exposure. People that take calcium supplements often have the vitamin D incorporated with it. Calcitonin is another hormone that we measure. It's protein secreted by the thyroid gland. We will see it elevated in thyroid diseases and cancers. Ionized calcium regulates the secretion of calcitonin. Mineral disorders are hyper and hypo of the three minerals. This chart gives you elevated and decreased calcium levels in all these different conditions. It is significant to measure ionized calcium and parathyroid hormone, and you can see the two levels. This chart is utilizing the total calcium, showing you it's increased with primary hyperthyroidism and decreased with hypo, whereas the parathyroid gland itself would be just opposite because it's a feedback mechanism. Tetany is a condition that is significant. Often we'll see these in our trauma or ERs. It is caused by low ionized calcium and possibly magnesium. Begins with the neurological issues. We see muscle twitches and spasms, eventually seizures, and ultimately death if we don't get the ionized calcium back up.